Trucking can be an awesome and creepy profession. There's a lot out there on the open road to see. Maybe some things you wish you hadn't though. It's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Every year, since my fiance and I had been dating, which is 6 years, we take a 2-week trip. Me and the fiance like to switch it up. One year it's a nice resort or a cruise, then next a road trip or camping trip. So last summer, we had it in our mind to get in our SUV, load up our things, the dog, and go across our state to Nevada, see a bit of Nevada, and then on to Northern California. We have rules on these trips. We have to stop at every roadside attraction, and staying at crazy motels or hotels is a must. So, when we discovered there was a clown museum in northern Nevada, in a town called Tonopah, I knew we had to stay there. Well, my fiance hates clowns, like despises them, and that meant we needed to stay there. I made a reservation for one night, and when we got into Tonopah, we dropped the dog off at a friend of ours for the night. I don't remember if they allowed animals, but my friend had a lot of land, and we wanted the dog to run herself ragged and get energy out. So we pull up at this motel, and there are a ton of truckers, some bikers milling around, and my fiancée can handle her own. She's a cop. So I left her in the car while I ran to check in. I figured I would check us in, and then we would get washed up and go to dinner. I go inside to check in, and that is when this big burly lesbian trucker makes her way up to my fiancé. I come out after securing our room key and see she's bent over by the driver's window, wearing her cut-off flannel shirt, Levi jeans, and what looked like a genuine rattlesnake shit-kicker cowboy boot. I saw my fiancé wearing her. I'm trying to be nice, but I am losing my cool face. So I clear my throat so I can get into this vehicle. She turns around, sneering as she looks up at me, with a toothpick in her mouth. She hadn't been to the dentist in quite a while. She says something derogatory, asking if I am satisfying her needs. She cacked her fetid breath in my face, while my fiancé exclaimed that I satisfied her just fine. So she shrugs and saunters over to the group of other truckers. I sigh in relief, and we go to our room. I would like to say that we ended up going to bed, having an amazing night's rest, and waking up feeling amazing in the morning. I'd like to say that, but that isn't what actually happened, is it? No. That night we were in bed, after a round of nocturnal activities. I'm smoking a cigarette mindlessly, shuffling through a few channels, and my fiancé is browsing the web. There's a knock on the door, and we ask who it is, and I hear someone running away from the door. I get out of bed, wrapping a towel around my waist, and stick my head out the door to see no one. After that, there weren't any more knocks, so we went to bed. I woke up early the next day, and as we're pulling out, I notice a semi is following us. I chalk it up to someone pulling out and shrug it off. However, when the semi follows us as we head out to my buddy's farm, we start getting creeped out. It's about a 3-minute turning into my buddy's driveway, and he has a lot of land and a long-ass driveway. When the semi gets so close to the back bumper, it's almost pushing us. My fiancé pulls out the phone to call the police, when I swerve into the driveway and book it up to my buddy's house. Meanwhile, the semi stops, the doors open, and 3 truckers get out. 2 big butch lesbians, one being my fiance's admirer, and one being a big dude that easily weighed 450 pounds. Luckily, my buddy is a crazy survivalist and gun enthusiast, and he comes running out of his garage with a gun. The fiancé and I are seriously freaking out, and we are getting into the middle of some crazy gunfight when the truckers quickly get in and leave. We were going to dial the police, but my friend assured me they wouldn't bother us anymore. We quickly gathered up our dog and got the hell out of there. My grandfather was a long-haul truck driver. When we'd gather around his house, he would always share his strange and interesting stories of what he had seen on the road. Certainly, a genuinely incredible collection of stories, the best I've ever heard anyway. But the one that always stuck with me and freaked me out the most was the following. According to him, he was driving along a very desolate stretch of road in the middle of the night. He was running comfortably, so there was no rush to his journey at all. Traffic had been favorable, and he was feeling pretty good about himself. He didn't have much more to go, and expected to reach his destination by morning. As fate would have it, with this road being so desolate, he decided to pull up on the side of this barren road and just take in the view and get a bit of fresh air to feel a bit more at ease and awake. So he steps out of his truck, takes a good look around at the wilderness, and pulls out a cigarette from his pocket. He goes to light it up and breathes out a refreshing puff. He's just looking around at nature's beauty, admiring the crisp and beautiful landscape, when all of a sudden he hears someone behind him. There's a man. My grandfather is immediately on edge. Like I said before, this was a completely barren and desolate stretch of road in the absolute middle of nowhere. He gets spooked, but tries to be rational. Perhaps the person had just pulled up a few moments before, and my grandfather hadn't noticed him behind him. And maybe he was just lonely and wanted a chat. This person asks for a cigarette, and my grandfather hands one over. Oddly enough, he didn't ask for a lighter. He just holds it in his hand. My grandfather, feeling pretty awkwarded out, wanted to make small talk, so asked where the guy was heading. The guy gave some vague and ambiguous answer, and gave my grandfather vibes that he wasn't really interested in sharing personal information. So my grandfather at that moment just starts making a few steps towards the edge of his truck, because he wanted to see this guy's car. He was curious as to why he hadn't seen it before. So while still keeping conversation with the guy, he's just walking off to the side to get a good enough angle to see behind his truck. When he looks, he sees nothing. So then he assumes maybe he's parked next to him on the side that wasn't visible. After about 5 minutes of conversation, my grandfather realizes that although he did have a little bit of time to kill, he really should be on his way, although the gentleman did seem nice enough. So he bids the gentleman good night and starts to move towards the door of his truck. The gentleman then goes the other way and makes his way towards where my grandfather assumes is his vehicle. A tinge of curiosity sparks within him, and he goes to peek at this guy's car. But when my grandfather goes to see, there's nothing, and the man has vanished. My grandfather is beyond profoundly freaked out. He doesn't get back in his truck. Being a rational man, he starts to wonder, what if he'd been underneath the truck, even though that was incredibly unlikely. So he looks underneath, checks the wheels, checks the back, checks everywhere. No sign of the man. There's no way he could have made it to the roof. My grandfather would have heard it. In the eerie quiet after all. As my grandfather drives away, he looks in his mirrors to see if he hadn't have just missed it. And of course, he hasn't. There's no one there, and there's nothing there. Whenever he told me this story, he would always go quiet for a little bit after. This is without a doubt the most freaked out he'd ever been, because he was completely unable to rationalize the situation as to who the guy was, how he got there in the first place, and how he seemingly managed to evaporate into the nothingness after. On this night, my ex, a type A personality and aggressive driver, and I were making a 15-hour drive straight through from the Midwest to Texas. He never let me take the wheel or sleep, so the more exhausted he became, the worse the trip. By the time we'd reached Texarkana, it was 3 a.m. We hadn't seen another vehicle in an hour, and his nerves were on my nerves. Ahead of us were finally dim taillights. Pulling within a couple of car lengths, we see a semi. Even though there were no other cars around, my ex makes an unnecessarily violent swerve to the left to pass. I screamed what the hell when he jerked right behind the semi again. He started off on one of his rants, something about another truck. Right beside our driver door, like a foot, was another semi. Inside our car was a madhouse, as these two semis boxed us in out of nowhere. My ex is having a screaming gesture, having a proper fit. I get a close look at the driver, right beside us. Damned if he didn't look like a young Charles Manson. Wild, dark hair, crazy eyes, and cackling. I was glad I couldn't hear. But something was off. Or even more off. The wild-eyed trucker was filming my ex ranting on an old camcorder. I laughed hard, and the ex wasn't amused. I said, "That driver does this for kicks, don't you get it?" My ex still sees no humor. I bet you anything that we're going to show up on a tape at his next party, along with anyone else he'd got. The driver pulled ahead, and out of sight, when he saw me laugh. Of course, my ex bitched the rest of the way there. And that's why he's the ex. First of all, I would just like to say that I have met plenty of truck drivers in my life, and most of them have been pleasant, albeit a bit lonely. However, like any group of people, there are gross exceptions. A few months ago, I was driving back to school from visiting my parents. It's about a 2-hour drive, so I usually keep myself entertained with music. I'm a 5'3", 21-year-old female, driving my dad's little old pickup truck in the leftmost lane of a 3-lane highway, talking around to the music on the radio. Suddenly, I notice a semi-truck is going the exact same speed as me, in the rightmost lane. Embarrassed for getting caught in dork mode, I stopped singing and dancing and tried to speed up, so he couldn't see me anymore. He matched my speed, which ticked me off a little bit, so I looked at the driver, expecting to see some angry arsehole. To my surprise, he was smiling and waving. Thrown off, I kind of chuckled and waved back. Big mistake. He moves over to the middle lane to be closer to me, and now he won't stop smiling and waving. At first, I played nice, waving back a little because semi-trucks beat tiny pickup trucks any day. But I was mostly focusing on getting out of this guy's field of vision safely. I tried speeding up as fast as my truck would allow, which is about 90 miles an hour, and slowly slowing down as suddenly as I could without endangering someone behind me. But he would match my speed no matter what. And if there was someone coming up in his lane, he'd move to the right lane at the last possible second and pass them before I could slow down and get behind them. He's had a lot more practice with reckless maneuvering than I had, so he has trapped me, and he's using other cars to help him. The whole time, he's smiling, waving, and holding up the number 1 sign finger for some reason that I still don't know, and rapidly losing any charm he once had. As this continues for about 5 miles, I got worried and called 911. I gave them a description of the truck, white cargo truck, black cab, with some Pennsylvania company logo on it, and a driver, a balding middle-aged guy with a tan and a dirty blue t-shirt on. They advised me to pull over at the emergency shoulder on the left, but I've never done that before, and it looked too narrow, so I didn't feel comfortable doing it. At this point, he was almost passing someone else in the middle lane, and I finally had a chance to slow down and merge 2 lanes over to the rightmost lane. I started speeding past him so he couldn't trap me again, and the operator told me to take the closest service plaza about 5 miles away. She said he probably couldn't follow me, so I could stop there for a few minutes before getting back on the highway. She told me to call if he did follow again. He probably wouldn't though, so she hung up. Now, he's still holding up the number 1 sign and smiling this creepy, increasingly perverted grin at me, while I avoid eye contact. The service plaza is now a 1/4 of a mile away, and I'm not using any turn signals, but I guess he knew what I was doing, because he braked hard and merged behind me, right at the last second, to join me in exiting the service plaza. After I get my heart back up from the coronary it just experienced, I dialed 911 again. Now, the way the service plaza was set up was that semi-trucks had to use separate lanes winding to the right of the plaza that led to parking lots for big trucks. The rest of us used a smaller lane to park immediately in front of the plaza. I parked, and as I'm explaining to the new operator what's going on, I watch the semi creep around its path while the driver stares me down, smiling. I freaked. He knew where I had parked. He knew where to find me, if I just stayed there. I thought maybe I could have floored it to get back on the highway, but I was afraid he'd see me and follow me. I drove to the gas station on the left of the plaza, which had a view of the semi-truck parking lot, hoping he wouldn't find me until police came. Transfers me to the woman who was helping me before. She informs me that they've dispatched a couple of police cars, but wouldn't tell me how long they would be. I see the trucker had gotten out of his truck and is heading my way. Even though my windows are closed and my doors are locked, I'm panicking on the phone to the operator. She tells me the police should be there soon, and that I should be safe there. So I sit tight while I keep her updated. I wanted to, at least, drive back to the parking lot I was in before, but it was the only entrance to the gas station, so I couldn't. I glared at the trucker and showed him my phone when he came close. He finally stopped smiling and made it look like he was going to the service plaza. I looked in my right side view mirror and found him hiding behind the big white pillar in front, staring at me. Again I freaked out and asked the operator where the cops would be and if I could leave because he was being ultra creepy. She tells me to sit tight again because they're going to be there any minute. Then he comes out of hiding and starts walking towards my truck. I put it in drive just in case and tell the operator what he's doing. I refuse to make eye contact with him, but I keep watching my mirrors to make sure I know where he is. The smile is back, and he starts walking circles around my truck, looking at it as if he's looking for a way to get in. I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until he circled back behind me, floored it, and told the operator I was not waiting one more second for the police. She apologized and told me the police would look for the man and talk to him if they found him, and that I should focus on getting home safely while keeping an eye for him. I don't know if they did or didn't find him, but I know none of that would have happened if my boyfriend were with me. So not only could I not walk alone, but I now can't drive alone. Nice to know. But creepy trucker dude who can't take a hint? Let's not meet. This story happened to me 2 summers ago. Just a little about me before I get into it. I was 18 at the time and had just started college, living out of state, on my own for the first time. I had a pretty sheltered life as a female. So, my first semester at my out-of-state college had just ended, as it was May, and I was on my way home for my brother's wedding. I am about an hour away from my current residence, with a little over 3 hours left of my trip. Everything is going great, and I'm just cruising with traffic. It was a notably busy day for that particular stretch of interstate. As I said, all is well until I check my mirror. There is a truck a little further back up from my side of the car, in the lane next to me. I can see his headlights in my passenger side mirror. I look up, because even though it's the middle of the afternoon and super sunny out, this dude is flashing his lights at me. I try to brush it off and assume he was just trying to get into my lane. So I try moving, and he stays behind me the whole time, not letting any other cars between us. He keeps flashing his lights at me, and I look up at him. He waves and honks. This was a red flag, but I took it the wrong way. I'm like, oh shit. I wonder if he's signaling me to pull over. I hope nothing is wrong with my car. The only reason I think this is because the other week before I was leaving, I had gotten a hole in my tire and had it patched. I was worried about the patch and thought it had fallen out, and that my tire was going flat as I travelled at 60 miles an hour. I'm freaking out about my car and plan to pull off at the next exit. Fortunately, it comes up quickly, and there's a gas station with some customers visible from the exit ramp. I head there and pull up at a gas pump. Curiously, the trucker follows me off the interstate and into the same parking lot, but he parked in the designated truck zone. I get out just before he parks and walk around my car doing a quick inspection. I see him start to get out of his truck, and I decide to buy gas, even though I filled up before I left. As I swipe my card to pay for my gas, the truck driver had reached my car. Luckily for me, since I was already pretty freaked out by him following me off the exit, I had my phone in hand with 911 already dialed, so I would just have to hit the call button. I left my driver door open and stayed between that and the gas house, him standing a few feet away from the back of my car, the hose separating us. The first thing the guy says to me is, "Well, aren't you a purty little thing?" I'm screaming in my head now, imagining all possible scenarios for an escape. He looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s, roughly 170 pounds, whereas me, an 18-year-old 125-pound girl, without muscle or fat anywhere on me. I wouldn't have been able to fight back much. Anyway, I tell him thank you, and he offers to buy me gas, and I declined, saying my parents gave me money. I was actually worried he would expect something in return if I had taken his offer. He asked me questions, like where I was from and where I was going, and didn't reveal a thing. My gas was done pumping after a minute, a whole $12, and with that, I bid him goodbye, jumped in my car, and got the hell out of there. I kept an eye on him as I left, making sure he didn't follow me any longer, and I never saw him again. I didn't know what he wanted with me that day, whether or not he just wanted to let me know I was attractive or not, or if he had much darker intentions planned. Maybe I should have reported him to the police. I've always been leery of sketchy truck drivers. This is a true story. It happened to me. I have been in this kind of situation before. I've had to deal with some really creepy weird guys out there. Sure, but that just comes with the profession. When most guys see a lady trucker of my age and build, they can become very crude. I've been in several brawls as an adult, and lots of fights growing up. I've never been one for looking for trouble. Trouble has always had its way of finding me. Nothing I've ever dealt with, though, would have prepared me for this. I'm telling this story because these things I witnessed scared the hell out of me. I'm not the type that scares easy either. What I saw made me believe I was losing my sanity. I have a very strong belief in the paranormal. There are things in this world that we never fully understand. I am an over-the-road, self-employed trucker here in the States. I run almost all of the lower 48 states, and I've been trucking since I was 18. I've always wanted to be a trucker, since I was knee-height to a grasshopper. My dad has been driving since 1975, 43 years. He's 63, and is still trucking. He's always been my role model. Me and my dad are very close. My rig is a 2016 Freightliner Cascadia. It's a good truck, but I prefer long-hooded Peterbilt trucks. The model 379 is my favorite. I delivered a load in Portland, Oregon late in the evening. I was irritated because I was scheduled to deliver my load at 3:30 on a Friday. My dispatcher goes home at 5, but my unease was put aside when I rolled through the gate at 3 o'clock and got a message with details on my next load. This irritated me because outgoing freight in this area is slow right now. I didn't want to get stuck here all weekend waiting. The brokers for the company I'm leased to go home at 5, so I would be screwed on a Friday. I got delivered at 3:30. I pulled through the gate, leaving this receiver at 3:45. They unloaded me very fast, and no lumper fee. Yay. So I got back on good old Interstate 5 heading south towards Eugene, Oregon to pick up my next load. My next load was preloaded. All I have to do upon arrival is to drop the empty trailer and hook my loaded one and get the BOL and roll towards the receiver, which was in Eureka, California. After I got loaded in Eugene, Oregon, I got on Highway 126, headed west to Highway 101, the coastal highway, which is the fastest way to get to Eureka, California from here. I only had an hour and 23 minutes left on my logbook after leaving Eugene, so I had to roll as far as I could. I made it to a little spot on the side of the road 101, just in time too. I had exactly 14 minutes of driving remaining, and that was cutting it close. The sun had just gone down after I shut down for my 10 hours off. I go out to check my reefer temperature because this is a load of frozen food and must be maintained at -8 Fahrenheit. I get out with my flashlight and my metal tire thumper to check my tires and look for any leaks or oil, etc. My reefer temp was still okay, so I continued down the left side of my rig, beating my tires, checking inflammation conditions were all good. I go to the back of my rig, fixing to walk around the rear of the trailer, and I heard something walking around the woods. Something big and heavy. Whatever it was only 30 to 40 yards away from me. Its footsteps didn't sound like anything I'd heard before. It was in the woods to the right of me out of the trees. I turned to look with my flashlight but saw nothing. So I brushed it off as just some animal walking around or something. I started walking down the right side of my rig checking things, and this was very strong feelings of both dread and coldness that crept over me. I had the feeling I was being watched, so I slowly turned my head and my heart skipped a beat. My blood ran cold when no less than 100 feet away from me, in the tree line, were bright red eyes staring back at me. I felt as if they were staring into my soul. Whatever this thing was, it was at least a foot taller than I. I'm no small woman, 5'11" and 160 pounds, all-toned muscle. This thing stood there staring at me. I was petrified. I couldn't move. I was trembling with fear. I was shaking so badly that my flashlight pointed at the ground as I looked, waving back and forth. I finally worked the nerve to slowly raise my flashlight up to see what this thing was staring at me. What I saw I will never forget. It was a dog or wolf-like creature with slender long limbs and a jet black nose with long pointy ears, standing on its hind legs. It suddenly let out this god-awful shriek after raising its head. I can only describe this sound as a teenage girl screaming at the top of her lungs. It suddenly squatted down on its butt and looked at me like a cat does before it pounces on a mouse. At that moment, I realized, shit, the thing is going to attack me. It lunged at me. It was right in front of me in an instant. I realized I still had my tire thumper in my hand, so I whacked the thing across the side of its head. It let out a loud grunt, and I ran around for the front of my rig. I opened the driver doors and jumped in and locked it. I fully expected this thing to counterattack, but it didn't. At least not right away. I ran into my sleeper and grabbed my kukri knife. It's very long and razor sharp. And after grabbing my knife, I closed the curtains and sat in the dark. My heart felt like I was going to explode. It was shaking like a leaf from all the adrenaline. That's when I heard the creature crawl under my rig. I could hear it scratching and grunting. I felt it banging, like it was tearing my undercarriage to pieces. I grabbed my phone to call for help. Of course, no signal. I searched out the cab and turned on my CB radio and grabbed the mic and frantically started calling for help. I was down in a hole, but it was worth a shot. I got no response. I dropped my CB mic and reached over and pulled the air horn cable out and just held it wide open. My air horn is under my cab, and that's all it took. I heard it crawl out and run off, and all was quiet. After what seemed like hours, I finally calmed down and woke up to the sun barely coming up. I thought and hoped I'd dreamt it, but when I looked down, my hunting knife was still in my hand. I realized then it wasn't a dream. I waited for the sun to be in the sky before I came out and looked at my rig. I slowly opened the door, still clutching the knife. I had a look under, and to my surprise there was no damage of any kind. That's when I noticed a patch of black fur stuck to a bolt. To this day, I will never come down Route 101. I grew up in Utah, less than 10 miles away from the notorious Skinwalker Ranch. I had a similar experience there. I've always wondered if they're somehow related. My uncle lives out deep in rural Oregon. He told me this story where he was driving to work really early in the morning to a small town about 30 minutes away. There was a bit of traffic just outside of town, so he stopped beside another car. There was a super heavy fog this morning, like Silent Hill quality. Really thick, so he could just see the backlights of the car in front of him. After following the car very slowly for a while, the car stops once more in traffic. My uncle sits there and waits for about 20 minutes. The car hasn't moved. All he can see is the headlights in front of him. Eventually, he gets out to see what's the matter. When my uncle gets out and walks to the car in front of him, he sees the entire front of the car completely totaled. Inside, the driver was dead. The back part of the car was completely fine, and my uncle did not know a thing was wrong earlier due to the fog. The story always unsettled me when I had to drive in fog. In the early 90s, I was a cattle hauler for a company out of Austin, Texas. I picked up cows and brought them to the slaughter. Not a chivalrous job, but America's gotta eat, right? Late one night at around 2 or 3 a.m., I'm going back to Austin for another load, when the urge to pee started to come too much, so I began searching for a restroom. I find a rest stop and wheel in a hurry, and run to the restroom. But guess what? It's out of order. But my bladder isn't, so I opt for the trees behind it. There I am, half asleep, my pants wide open, and I'm peeing like a racehorse, when all of a sudden, I hear a very feminine but manly giggle coming from the trees. I pause and begin squinting to see where it was coming from. Out of nowhere I hear, "He's gonna see us," followed by another giggle. Now, I'm not sure if I'm hearing things because of lack of sleep, or if this is real, so I pretend it's my imagination and I continue peeing in the bushes, when the bushes rustle again, and then I realize this isn't fake. As the bushes rustled, I hear someone shout, "Ouch, that hurts!" So now I know they're in pain and afraid of being seen. I say, "Hello, is everything okay?" I get a reply, "Oh no, he's able to hear us," and a quick rustle of leaves as if someone's rolling around. All of a sudden, it sounded like a herd of elephants were charging at me, and I began running with my pants still round my knees, getting back up to see where I was going towards my truck. I began running backwards with my pants still around my knees, trying to get them back up and see where I'm running, when I trip backwards, falling, feet in the air, arse cheeks collecting dirty leaves and grass, when two men rush past me, trying to get their own clothes on. I roll around, fighting my pants back up, as they move like Olympic sprinters across the parking lot to the Toyota pickup as they race off. I get up slightly embarrassed and try to comprehend what happened. I make it back to my truck, still baffled and laughing. I just had the life scared out of me by two gay guys. So to the two men in the rest stop in Texas, I apologize for ruining your fun. Maybe next time we can meet on better terms. I've seen quite a few random and crazy weird things, and heard a few stories from other truckers. Here's one though that I witnessed personally. I drive a truck, and when I hauled steel, I would often run on paper logs, drive all day and well into the night. I do upwards of 1,000 miles or a 19-hour day, and the tail end of those trips were always a little bit harrowing. When you get within 10 to 20 miles of your destination and precious sleep, you get a sudden burst of energy, just enough so you know you'll make it. It's a nice feeling of satisfaction, but it doesn't come without a price. Hallucinations, for me at least, that very last breath of energy after a long run, often brought with it some crazy shit. To make matters worse, places where one might deliver sheet metal coils tend to be directly inside the butt crack of nowhere, and reaching them involves a lot of two-lane roads through the woods. Combine narrow twisting roads, hallucinations, paranoia about getting caught running illegal, and just enough energy to be aware of it all, and you've got what we call a situation on your hands. One particular night stands out. The 800 or so miles had taken about 17 hours, thanks to the hills and the back roads I had taken to get there, to as close a place to rural as New Jersey likely gets, just across from Delaware to Philly. I was coming down from a back-to-back dose of double shots, and was about 15 minutes away from the 4 hours of sleep I would be getting that night. I was on edge, and starting to see shit again. My hallucinations weren't really readily identifiable things, like people, oases, or giant stacks of bacon and such, but vague flashes of movement and light. It was as if a fox wearing a suit of strobing LEDs was about to dart out of the tree line. It freaked me out just enough that I usually had one foot on the clutch at all times, in case I had to jam the brakes. I knew it wasn't real, but it still bothered me. In the midst of all this, I was rounding a bend and saw about a quarter of a mile down the main road, standing in my lane, and saw about a quarter of a mile down the road, a man standing in my lane. He had a green reflective vest on and was waving his arms, too real and tangible to be a hallucination. I began to slow down, immediately wary of the situation, and the scene unfolded before me as I approached. A mid-size SUV was on its side, and on the other side of the road, a little pull-off carved out the forest was bristling with some sort of construction activity at the lively hour of 3 a.m. What the hell? Then, from out of the trees, burst a bobcat. No, not a mountain lion, but one of those four-wheel little mini excavator things commonly used in landscaping. It darted about with all the agility of its namesake, save for the moment when it turned to face the roof of the car, where it nearly tipped over. The bobcat pushed the vehicle over, and at least a dozen people crawled out. I stopped counting at 8. I was in a state of mental lapse and had no idea what happened. Finally, the guy in the vest let me pass, and my last 10 minutes of driving were marked by a sense of calm as I saw every cop car and ambulance in southern Jersey fly past me in the opposite direction, knowing they had something better to do than check my logs. I got to my destination safely and went to sleep. Trucking. It's routine. The same task, the same chair, the same wheel, the same job. But if you pay attention, it can be an adventure every day. I've seen lots of fire. I've probably personally saved loads in damages just from calling 911. The craziest was this one time I was home. The sun was just barely down, and I saw a truck heading the other way with something bright. There was a constant line of sparks, 4 feet high, flying from his back right tire. I'd never seen so many sparks, as if he were doing it on purpose. It was quite scary. As he passed me, I could see that the sparks were now a solid wall of fire, several 100 feet long, and about 3 feet high. I called 911 that second and told them to hurry, because that fire had a head start. I figured I might have saved the firefighters a few seconds before the next call would have been in, and hoped it made a difference. Saw it 3 days later. They got me in there before it reached away from the highway. I saw it on TV 3 days later. They got there in time, before it reached away from the highway. I've also driven into storms that convince me I'm about to die. I mean, like walls of storm. It took less than a minute to go from clear to I can't see. And I'm going at 70 with a full load. In all likelihood, I'm about to either smash into a stopped car or manage to stop in time to get wrecked from behind. I've also had to literally dodge other cars. Sometimes people make mistakes or get angry. Maybe because drugs, but I've had cars both unintentionally and intentionally try and hit me on the highway. If you want an adrenaline rush, experience that. When you're trucking, you're controlling something so powerful that you hold everyone's lives around you in your hand. Can you imagine a 26,000-pound truck hitting a 3,000-pound car? I'm sure I've saved people's lives by keeping track of the bigger picture and dodging other cars in heavy traffic. Still scares me thinking about those times when I've been a fraction of a second from a national newsworthy wreck. I once found a car on the highway that was rolled at 3 a.m. A few people were standing around it, and I asked them what was going on and offered my help. They said they had no clue. They had just seen the car blocking one lane and pulled over. The worst part was that we didn't see anyone associated with the car. We wanted to believe that they had fled the scene, but we were afraid they may have been flung a few 100 feet away, somewhere out in the tall grass where we couldn't see. Never found out about that one. I occasionally pick up hitchhikers. Very interesting people. You want to have an interesting day? Find a hitchhiker. I usually do when it's cold out. And I've got enough room to pull over safely within a quarter mile of the guy. Most of them are very poor, for different reasons. But some are on an adventure, like Jade. He said he was traveling for a life experience. We spoke for 2 hours straight about life, and about who we were and what we wanted. He said he was going to Mexico for some hippie community where everyone's nude and you just do drugs and make love to each other. Some are on a mission, like my most recent rider. I can't remember his name, but he was heading to Houston, Texas to pick up a disability check. He seemed pretty smart and hardworking. He was trying to help me with stuff our whole trip. But some of the guys are crazy. I met one guy who seemed to have half a dozen mental disorders. I have a bullshit degree in psychology, and I started to genuinely fear for my life. This guy told me I wouldn't believe him, but he was the leader of a secret Asian group that had 20 leaders that all ESP to each other. He would try to explain by telling me to look at the next sign on the road and then say, yeah, you see? No? The next one. Next one you'll see it. I thought he might actually be trying to kill me, and I was genuinely afraid. I can't try to fight somebody whilst I'm driving a truck on a highway. Sometimes it's the most small and meaningful stuff you remember. Like when beautiful songs come on when you're driving in the most beautiful sunset you've seen in weeks. Or when you see a board on the road and you line up your tire to run over the edge of it and successfully flick it 15 feet off the road. One of my favourite memories is just trying to watch Monsters Inc. on the 10-inch monitor in the Suburban next to me for a few minutes. But I do have a few more notable memories. I've driven in hill country a couple of times, and I get to see these beautiful fogs. It builds up in the valley, and it's like a dream. The fog, much more than the storms, can actually be walls. It's so cool to go from clear day to 50-foot vision in about a second, and then instantly back to clear in another 2. I've had a guy on a motorcycle next to me practicing his wheelies for 2 minutes. Talk about nerve-wracking. Perhaps the most memorable I had was just joining a caravan that was speeding for an hour. If you've never done this, you always join up at the back and watch the same trade time, usually about 10 to 15 miles. Then the front guy will drop back and the next person will lead for the same amount of time. Everyone takes a turn leading, and everyone is less likely to be pulled over. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I had a cold last week, and it seems the cough came back with a vengeance. So if you notice anything off with my voice, that's why. Sorry. I want to give a big shout out to Tom Keithley. Thanks for always watching and supporting the channel, bro. It means a lot. And I have to agree with your comment, police stories are some of the most intense. I definitely want to do more of them. If you enjoyed today's video, please drop a like and leave a comment. It goes a long way in helping even more people with a taste for horror find my channel. Seriously, it means so much more than you can imagine just pressing one button and leaving one comment. So, if you have the time, really appreciate that. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the little bell icon to be up to date with everything I post. If you'd like me to read your story on my channel, feel free to send it to my email or share it to my Reddit. Both can be found in the description. Just please, Be sure to paragraph your stories and include lots of details. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.